Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Heartbeat, your daily Inter Miami podcast. And today we are talking about César Montes, the Mexican international player for Almeria, and the player Inter Miami wanted to bring in at the end of the window to complement this roster, to complete this roster, to make this the best possible team it could. And it's a shame they didn't because Montes is a heck of a player. I want to talk about him. I want to talk about what this means for the rest of the team, what it means moving forward, what we can extrapolate from this information. But I haven't talked about this yet, so I figured I should. Over the past couple days, this name, Cesar Montes, has been rumored, bandied about, and clearly, I think it's become obvious this is the player they wanted to sign to be their second center back signing, their second major signing of the window, and ultimately to be the guy that helps them get over the top this season in the MLS. Let's rewind a couple weeks to August 2nd. Inter Miami acquired an international roster slot from the Colorado Rapids. And I think when that happened, all of us rightly thought this is someone. They have someone. They're bringing in another player, probably a center back, probably a right-sided center back because we had just signed David Martinez. And we kind of just waited for it to happen and waited for it to happen and waited for it to happen. And the team never was able to get over the line with this deal. And so that's disappointing, of course, but I still want to spend some time talking about it because what an interesting deal it would have been. Of course, Inter Miami has not been as silent as maybe we felt like they've been in this transfer window because they did sign David Martinez right at the beginning. They got Robert Taylor to a contract extension. They did move Schneider Borgelin off the roster. So there are some things that have happened in this transfer window, but ultimately, I think Inter Miami fans should come away a little disappointed with how this club has maximized their roster going into this final stretch, especially considering we've just had a big loss to Cincinnati, a tough loss over the last couple of days to the Columbus Crew. I think there are question marks for Inter Miami as if they can really compete at the top level of this league and of this confederation. You know, even going back to when we played Monterrey in the spring and Tigres of late, not able to win those games. And so is this team actually talented enough to win those style of games that we're going to need if we want to win the MLS Cup, if we want to win next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup, etc. Now, I will preference by saying almost all of those games were without Lionel Messi. And of course, if you take your best player off the pitch, it is going to make it more difficult to win those types of games. We didn't have Messi in the spring at home against Monterrey. We didn't have Messi against Cincinnati. We didn't have Messi against Columbus. We didn't have Messi against Tigres. So I understand that there's a difference in this team playing up to its full potential with Lionel Messi and without Lionel Messi. But we've also now realized as Inter Miami fans that you can't count on Lionel Messi to be there for the biggest games because he hasn't always been. And it's no fault of his own. It's mostly bad injury luck. And listen, he got a really tough kind of freak injury at the end of the Copa America, which is why we haven't seen him in quite some time. But ultimately, if you're Inter Miami, you have to at least take that into consideration. And you have a lot of other players on this roster that deserve to be put in the best position to win a trophy, win a championship, win a title. So what did they do? They spent much of the spring looking at this team and saying, and summer, and thinking this is not a team with enough defensive talent, especially at the center back position. We did sign Nico Freire, and I think that was a little bit less than what Inter Miami would have wanted. Certainly back when they signed him, there was a hope that he could be not just a replacement for Kamal Miller, but an upgrade on Kamal Miller. I don't know if he ever got there. He was looking better towards the end before he got that season-ending injury, but even despite that, Toto Aviles has been better since we've gotten him. I think he's gotten better month after month, actually. But compared to maybe a guy like Diego Gomez and the jump that he's made, obviously Toto Aviles has not made that same type of jump. And against the best teams, especially against the Mexican teams where we're going to get pressed all game, he did have a little bit of a weakness. And Sergei Kristoff is a solid player, but I think that there's some frustration with what Kristoff has been this season. And I'm not sure Tata Martino loves the idea of playing Christoph. He certainly doesn't love the idea of playing Ian Frey. And, he's relied on Noah Allen, but Noah Allen is a left back. He's not a center back. And so clearly this team went into the window thinking we have to upgrade at center back. I don't think even Toto Aviles, who I think was undisputed, our number one center back in terms of talent at the time, not including Busquets going into the back line and playing out of position, even including Aviles, I think they thought we need to upgrade the entirety of this position. And so, and I think they were even willing at some points to move on from Aviles if the right deal came for them. I don't think they ever thought Aviles was locked in perfect number one center back. And so they went into this window hoping they could get two guys that would be the bedstones of the rest of the season and moving forward, as we found out with what ended up being both of these players. Of course, they do get David Martinez, and he's looked really good in his first two games, a little worse than that third game against Toronto, but it's been a small sample size. We'll see what comes of that. But on the right side, they wanted César Montes, and I'm very glad that the first time I heard César Montes' name connected with Inter Miami over the last couple of days, it was already under the assumption that it was unlikely to actually come to fruition because, well, the reasons are unclear, but it was sort of already past the point of thinking this was going to happen because I actually really like this player. He's my favorite player on the Mexican national team. I didn't get a chance to watch him a ton in Spain, where his career has been mixed, I think is a fair way to put it. But for that player who I always enjoy watching him for the Mexican national team. And even when he was at Monterrey, he was a really good player. I think would have been a tremendous signing for Inter Miami. I know we bandied about guys like Rafael Varane and, the big superstar names like that, but César Montes would have come in and been, if not the best center back in the MLS, right there. And it would have been an incredible signing for Inter Miami. Again, I'm glad that by the time I heard this name, I was already in a position to say, I don't want to get my hopes up on this because it's probably not going to end up happening. Because if I had gotten my hopes up on this, I would have been crushed if it didn't happen because, again, this is a really good player. For those that don't know, he is Mexican. He grew up in the Monterrey system and played at Monterrey for 5, 6, 7 years. Finally, he gets his move to Europe. He goes to Espanyol in the summer of 2022 for $8 million, a big signing fee for a defender, especially a 25-year-old defender, not a 19-year-old prospect type player. Espanyol. He is a player for them. I think he missed a couple of games with a head injury. Isn't a locked-in starter, but he's a serious contributor and a guy you can see has the tools to be a really good player. Unfortunately, Espanyol gets relegated. And listen, he was part of the team that gave up the most goals in La Liga that year. So, like I said, it's been up and down over the last couple of years for him as far as his success in Spain. But he was good enough to merit a new move to another club in La Liga, and that was Almeria. So last summer, he, after getting relegated with Espanyol, is one of the players that gets picked up by a team still in the top division. And that was for even bigger transfer fee, 14 to 14.5 million, depending on the source, which is, almost twice what Espanyol paid for him and then got relegated and sold him for almost double the profit. It's a sign that clearly, even at Espanyol, even as they were getting relegated, even as they were giving up the most goals in the league, other clubs looked at this player and said, there's something here and I like it. And ultimately, he does make the move to Almeria, stays in the top division, but luck betrays him again, and he moves to a club that's on the verge of getting relegated. Almeria last season gets relegated, finishes 19th in La Liga, has the second most goals allowed in the league. So again, a up and down experience in Spain, I think would be putting it lightly. But ultimately, this is a good player. I think he proved in his first season that he belongs in La Liga. And I think in his second season, he proved that, he is a La Liga type player, maybe not a top of the table La Liga player, but a guy that can hang in that league. And for a player, especially a defender that can hang in La Liga, that is an incredible investment for an MLS club. And so, again, I would have been ecstatic if we got this player. But I did want to mention the relegations because it would be wrong of me not to. So why did this deal fall through? This is all speculation. So let me just start with that. But there was a report in July that Club America, the Mexican Giants, went in for Cesar Montes and ultimately had their bid rejected. It was a $7.5 million bid plus $2 million in add-ons. So almost 10 million outlay for Almeria, who again was relegated, and you would imagine would be interested in having this player sold so that they can make a profit before they get stuck in the second division, and they can have that financial outlay help them with their rebuild. Yet they didn't think 9.5 million was enough. And so that's where it comes to the head for Inter Miami. That was reported in late July. Inter Miami ends up trading for that international roster slot on August 2nd. So in my understanding and my belief, that around that August 2nd date, or in the couple days before then, Inter Miami came to an agreement with Montes about what a contract would look like for him. And then it was just a matter of, can they get the deal done with Almeria? Of course, if Almeria is rejecting 9.5 million from Club America, it is going to be a huge outlay for Inter Miami to add this player. Inter Miami has done this before. Not a lot, but they have gone to 8 figures to sign a player, and a Mexican player at that, in Rodolfo Pizarro. Now, that was a long time ago. That was their first major signing in terms of DP status, but they've been willing to spend 6, 7, 8 to 10 million over the last year on a number of occasions, right? Facundo Farias, 6.5 million. Toto Avilas was close to 7.5, 9 million based on the add-ons. Obviously, Federico Redondo was a $8.5 million outlay, but all of these players came in as under 22 DPs, which meant that the salary structure wouldn't be affected in a major way by what they were able to do. And so, I'm sorry, by being able to sign them. This is different. Montes is 26, 27. He's a prime age player. He's not a young kid. And so to add him would have been that would mean you would use your DP spot. They would have had to find a way to clear Campana's DP designation, which I do think they would be able to do without moving Campana. But ultimately, they would also have to commit to having Cesar Montes as the DP for the next couple seasons, for the rest of his contract, really, because there's no way that's going to amortize to a degree that it would put him under the DP threshold. So you would now have a situation where Montes is your DP over Jordi Alba, over Luis Suarez, which, if the actual contract for Montes is in line with those guys, I think wouldn't be a problem, but certainly something to consider. And they would have locked themselves in, and it seems like Inter Miami was willing to do that. They were not going to get this player for $3 million. They must have known that. And so whether they couldn't agree on a 7 million versus 10 million, or 11 million versus 15 million, whatever value they couldn't agree on, they knew this was going to be a DP player, and they were willing to make that commitment with Tata Martino at the helm. And I may remind you, because I don't think I've said it yet, Cesar Montes and Tata Martino would have built a very good relationship while Martino was the Mexican national team manager. And so their time with El Tri, I think, would have made this relationship happen. The fact that Montes got relegated, or Almeria got relegated into the second division, Montes looking for a move out of Almeria, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think ultimately there's a lot of reasons why this deal makes sense, and yet it didn't happen. And my best guess is that Inter Miami valued this player at 10 million, 9 million, 11 million, something like that. And Almeria wanted 18 million or something to that nature. And so they couldn't come to terms on an agreement. Probably Inter Miami felt that there was some wiggle room for Almeria, and Almeria probably feels like, and they have every right to feel this way, that they can get more for that player. I will remind you, the MLS transfer window closed last night at midnight, but in Europe, the window goes until the end of the month. So Inter Miami would have probably been Almeria's best offer from the MLS, and Liga MX, I don't think, was going to spend upwards of 20 million on this player, but they might feel that they can get this that type of outlay from an Italian club or a Spanish club or a Premier League side that's looking for a center back addition. So if you're Almeria and you feel like you still can squeeze this out for another 2 weeks to try and get a better deal, ultimately that's not going to include Inter Miami. And maybe they do have other suitors on the table, which made them less interested in selling to Inter Miami at whatever value Inter Miami felt Montes was worth. So what are the extrapolations from this? Because Montes, again, I really like this player. He is big, physical, athletic. I did not, full disclosure, I did not watch him a ton in Spain, if at all, but I have watched a ton of his games with Mexico. And at this level and in CONCACAF, he is a really, really good player. And I think he would have matched up really well with David Martinez. He's like 6'5", really tall, really big, physical presence, good in the air, would have been great on set pieces, both going, defending set pieces and in the attack on corners on set pieces. It would have been a weapon in that regard. And then he's just a solid player that's played at a high level and would bring a lot of experience and talent to Inter Miami. And again, he played for Monterrey, so he has experience playing in CONCACAF. He's played for Tata Martino. He knows what Tata Martino likes, how to work under Tata Martino's system. And he also is a guy that at Monterrey has played for a winning club, a team that feels like they should win the league every season. So he understands what that pressure is like. He understands what this culture would have been like. And I think for all of those reasons, this would have been an amazing fit. What do I take away from this? As I mentioned, Inter Miami was willing to spend a DP slot on Montes, which says to me that they are and will be, at least for the foreseeable future, willing to spend a DP slot on a center back. That's a big question in the MLS. Should you spend one of your precious DP slots on a defensive player when attacking talent is so prevalent? Well, clearly Inter Miami was willing to do that over the last couple weeks in order to make this team as good as it could possibly be. And so I want to commend them for that, for not being beholden to a doctrine that may or may not make sense for them. Secondly, it means that Inter Miami was willing to send Tota Aviles to the bench. If we had signed Montes, he would have been the starter on the right side. David Martinez would have been on the left side. And I'm realizing as I'm doing this that I would have gotten their names mixed up far too frequently. But you would have had a starting partnership of César Montes and David Martinez. And I think that there's a tremendous chance that would be the best center back partnership in the league and one of the best in CONCACAF. So Inter Miami was very ambitious in this, and I want to give them credit for that, although, it remains to be seen how foolhardy that was, because you want your team to be ambitious, but not foolhardy and sort of not come up with results in the pursuit of high ambitions. But I do love the ambition. Again, they were willing to send Aviles to the bench. I mentioned this earlier. I don't know if Aviles is locked into their plans moving forward. I do think he's gotten better month after month since he's gotten here. And I think maybe in February or March, when we pick up this next season, we might see an even different Tota Aviles, who's, again, coming into his own. And for a player of his age at his position to be starting game in and game out at this level is not particularly common. And so he is a young player that's going to continue getting better and I think has a bright future. But for this stretch run, at least, and for the early parts of next season, because Montes would have still been around, David Martinez is on loan until next summer, Aviles would have been a second option for Inter Miami. Or they were going to go back to a back three. We know early in the offseason, early in the season, Tata Martino's plan was to go the 3-5-2 and have Jordi Alba and a right wing back, possibly Julian Gressel, be the sort of wing outlets and then just go with a front two of Messi and Suarez. We saw it a lot early in the season. It did not work. We saw it a lot in the preseason. It was really bad. Part of it was because we didn't have the right center backs to play that. And part of it was because our midfield makeup wasn't strong enough defensively to protect our back line. And so is part of that solved by the emergence of Yannick Bright? I think so, although I'm not sure Tata Martino's all there. And then if you get a back three of Montes in the middle with David Martinez on the left and Aviles on the right, you have a much more athletic, much more stable, much more experienced, much more solid back line, much more talented back line than we had early in the season when we were going with guys like Frede and Christoph and Noah Allen and Ryan Saylor may have started a couple games. So would we have gone back to a 3 in the back? I don't know. I think that's interesting to think about, but I also think it's actually most likely that we would have just put Aviles on the bench. And then the final takeaway is that for now, Inter Miami's stock of quality options at the position is still very thin. And clearly they wanted another center back. And whatever Tata Martino says now, and whatever Chris Henderson says now, it is backtracking. They always wanted to get 2 center backs in this window. And they come up short. They only add David Martinez. We know he's a little bit of an injury risk. Hopefully it's not going to be a problem, but I think there's still room to add another center back moving forward into next season. Ultimately, kind of disappointing. I think this means we're still going to get Busquets on the back line at least a couple times, because Aviles and David Martinez are your top 2, but you're going to need to rotate sometimes, and you're going to have midweek games, and you're going to have the potential that either one is missing games because of a yellow card accumulation. We've already seen Martinez get a red card. Martinez has an injury history. Aviles has missed a couple games with injury. So I think there's a good chance we see more of Busquets on the back line. Whereas I think if Inter Miami brought in a César Montes, that experiment, or that would have been finished. So those are some of the takeaways. And then my last question that I wanted to address is what comes next. For the record, Inter Miami can still sign players that are free agents for the next month. So any player in the world that is a free agent as of right now can still be signed for the next 4 weeks. I don't think there's a ton of talent out there that are still free agents, but perhaps there is. Inter Miami still has that international roster slot that does expire at the end of this season. So it will go to waste if they don't use it on someone. There's also some cap space available to Inter Miami if they want to use it. So if they find a free agent out there, whether it's a center back or not, that they think can help this team win this year, they may look to bring him in. Of course, like I said, they're going to be active until the end of the window for free agents, which I believe is September 13th. So another month. But I would be a little surprised if that happens. I don't think they're desperate to add another body. And so if an opportunity presents itself, that is something that is going to be possible to them. That cap space and that international roster slot will expire at the end of the season. So if they have someone that they can bring in that they think helps, I'm sure they will. But for now, I do think this is the roster we're going to have until the end of the season and through the MLS Cup. It's probably just a let's bring Lionel Messi back and hope that at that point we are the best team in the league. And I do think there are good reasons to think that could be the case. So there's a positive, optimistic ending to this. I think that's entirely possible. And then the last thing I would say is pay a lot of attention to César Montes over the next 2 weeks, because the European transfer window closes on September 1st. If Montes doesn't move in this window, which would probably be a little surprising just because I don't think he wants to play in La Liga 2. And if Almeria was holding out for a bigger offer than what Inter Miami and what some of the Mexican clubs are willing to offer, then it's probably because they feel that they have something or someone lined up that they can sell him to. But in the chance that Montes does not move this summer, look for him in January, because that relationship with Tata makes a lot of sense. His age profile, prime age, he's 27, so a prime age player. And Inter Miami's already been willing to spend a lot to bring this player in. So keep an eye on Montes. If he doesn't move in the next 2 weeks from Almeria, he could definitely be a guy that Inter Miami goes back in for in January. And, for the record, this is exactly what happened with David Martinez. We went in for him last January, couldn't agree a deal with River Plate, even though we had an agreement with the player. And ultimately, River Plate couldn't move him, and we get our guy in the next transfer window. So keep an eye on César Montes moving forward. I think this is a name that, as long as he's at Almeria, is going to be an option for Inter Miami, and certainly one that would get me excited. So, guys, that's it for today. I hope you had a better day yesterday after a disappointing Monday night. I will, as always, be back tomorrow. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. See you then.